Today, Hans Niemann played Gukesh in what we thought would be a one-sided slow grind. Instead, what we got were literally unbelievable sacrifices from both players, but it's not what you think. Niemann is white and Gukesh is black. The game starts out with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6 and bishop b5, the Roy Lopez opening. a6, bishop a4, knight to f6 and Niemann castles. Gukesh plays bishop to e7, d3, kicking the bishop away with b5, bishop comes to b3 and then Gukesh castles. Here Hans plays a4, bishop b7, rook e1, and then h6, and now both players are officially out of book theory. Niemann takes on b5, pawn takes back, and then he trades the rook. Plays knight to c3, bishop comes to b4, and he defends. Bishop trades, and then Hans takes with the pawn, and he has this idea of a kind of barricade in the center. Gukesh plays d6, creating a pawn chain in the center, and then Niemann plays queen to b1. Knight comes to e7, and we see c4, and there's a trade. Gukesh plays bishop a6, offering a trade, but the trick here is if Hans takes, it'll be a very equal pawn structure, and you don't want that against the world champion. So Niemann plays bishop to b3, keeping this scope, and Gukesh's bishop is useless here, so he plays bishop c8. Niemann plays queen to b2, allowing his rook to come and move around. And now Gukesh plays bishop g4, which would usually pin the knight, but the queen's not there. So rook comes to a1, getting the tempo on the queen. And now, after queen b8, there is no pin, so this knight is free to go. You know, he can move around, he can rotate. He goes for a sacrifice here. Knight takes e5. It's not a brilliant move. I wish it was, but it's not. After Gukesh takes back, the queen takes, and now Hans has won 2 pawns in the center for his knight. He's down 1 point in material and 1.5 points on the engine. A very tricky position to play against Gukesh. But that's chess. Sometimes whenever someone's better than you, you just have to confuse them and get them into a position they don't feel comfortable in. I'm sure Hans knows he's losing here, but he knows all the pressure is on Gukesh in this moment. So playing on, we have knight g6, queen back to g3, and then c5, f4, h5, e5, and then h4. And obviously you can see that it's going to be a very pawn-heavy endgame, because both players are being quite aggressive with their pawns. Queen comes to e3, and then we see knight to h5, and what he's doing here is he's double attacking this pawn, which would be completely losing if Hans gives it up. So Niemann plays queen e4, so now he has this discovered attack on his own pawn, so he's defending his pawn. And now Gukesh plays queen to c8, which is a brilliant move because Hans can take on g6, but it would just result in this variation, and surprisingly he ends up a pawn after this, but it's just a very hard position to defend, and Gukesh is completely winning here. Instead of taking the bait on g6, Hans plays rook to a4, the best move, and then he's offered a trade of queens. Should he do this? No, but he does. And now they're in an endgame. Hans has 2 very obvious weaknesses, and Gukesh is going to try his best to take advantage of them. King f2, bishop d7. Rook comes up attacking the bishop, and then the bishop's safe. Here, f4 is a big weakness, so king comes up to f3 to defend. Bishop takes on c3, pawn takes back, and now Hans is losing by 3 points on the engine in classical against the world champion of chess. There's no way to fix this position, but you'll be surprised. Gukesh plays f5. Now, Hans attacks the knight, and Gukesh defends. We see rook to d6 with the idea of probably defending this pawn, and the next move being b4 to get rid of this pawn. Gukesh of course finds the best move, and then we see g4, en passant takes back, and Gukesh takes on b3. Now Niemann has to move over to defend his pawn, but first he has to defend his pawn on the g-file. So he plays bishop to e1, we see c4, king e3, and there's this trade done. Now, Niemann is down by 2 points in material and 3 points on the engine. But Gukesh goes for this crazy idea. He doesn't play knight to e7 or king to g8 and go for the win. He does exactly what Niemann does, and he takes by sacrificing the knight on f4. This is a huge blunder and brings the position to a dead draw. Niemann takes back, probably in disbelief, but surprisingly he didn't show much shock. Gukesh takes on f4, we see king d4, king g6, bishop b4, king f7, and bishop d2, attacking the knight. Knight comes up to e6, and then we see king d5, king e7. This position is a complete draw. King c6, knight d8 check, and keep in mind all of these moves are pretty much perfect. King d5, knight e6, king c6, g5. And here it gets very surprising, because you'd think they'd offer a draw or, be playing super accurately. But no. Bishop b4 check, king f7, king d5 is a huge mistake, completely losing the game, losing by 4 points on the engine. All Gukesh has to do in this position is play g4, but he misses it and plays knight to f4 check. It just shows how long emotional games can really get to you. After this series of moves, they end up coming to a draw. It's just such an interesting game because they both played very similar sacrifices with their knights to gain pawns, and both sacrifices just weren't accurate. If you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.